Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Planning Board meeting for November 16th, 2021. My name is Carrie Marnick. I'm the chair of the Planning Board. Before we get started, I have a few announcements to read. This open meeting of the Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID virus. In order to mitigate, no, sorry, these are the wrong instructions, guys. Hold on a second. I knew that date was wrong. My apologies. Let me pull up the latest one.
I didn't realize it had changed.
That's it. Nobody would have noticed.
We got a new instruction. I know I've read this thing so many times. I actually recognize when it's the wrong one. Sorry about that. I'm just going to pull up from our last meeting. Let's see. Our last planning board meeting was at the 7th.
Yes.
Well, it was probably whenever we had the minutes. It was October. It was the middle of the month.
Oh, I got it. Okay, thanks everybody. Great. Okay, we'll start over here. Before we get started, I have a few announcements to read. This open meeting of the planning board is being conducted remotely. This is right. Consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the town of Northborough has been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of the planning board are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the planning board to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting may feature public comment. At this time, I will confirm that persons anticipated on the agenda are remotely present and can be heard by stating the following. Members, and I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Okay. Amy Pretsky?
Here.
Anthony Zaitin?
Here.
Millie Milton?
Here.
Okay. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Bob Federico? Oh, you're just on mute.
Here.
Okay. And Fred Litchfield?
Here.
Great. Okay, for presenters and applicants listed on the agenda, the chair will invite each speaker or applicant on the agenda by name to make a presentation and speak to their application. Participants will provide their full name and hold until their name is called. Each speaker will be asked to mute their phone or computer when not speaking and to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. Those responding will be asked to wait until the floor is yielded to them by the chair. Speakers who wish to respond to the comments of others do so through the chair, taking care to identify themselves. Each vote taken by the board or committee will be conducted by roll call vote. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comments as follows. By phone, dial *9 to raise your hand and wait to be recognized by the chair. Please note the party or phone number will be visible to those viewing the meeting. By Zoom, click raise hand on the bottom of your screen and wait to be recognized by the chair. The chair will ask members of the public who wish to speak and identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all public commentators, the chair will call on each by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. For this meeting will include executive session. Okay, great. Thanks for withstanding the mix up there. Why don't we get started with the agenda? First on the agenda, we have our town meeting zoning bylaws discussion. And for that, we have 2 different presentations. We do have a lot to cover this evening. So what I wanted to do is allow about 15 to 20 minutes per presentation. So first on our agenda here, we have Damon Amato for 75 Ridge Road. If we can bring him in.
Hi.
Hi, Damon. How are you? Welcome back.
Good, thank you.
So we're going to allocate about 15 to 20 minutes to talk through. I know you have a proposal for the overlay. I think Fred, you've joined us as well with some additional background from staff in regards to that. So whichever format makes sense to present, that's great. If do you need to share a screen or anything?
If I could, I have Scott Cameron, my engineer, on also.
Oh,
Do you want
sure. Yep.
him on also, and my business partner, Ben Legary.
Yep. Oops, there he is. Yep. Okay.
Okay, great.
And Ben,
Perfect.
yep, there we go. Okay.
When we get to it, I think I'll have Scott share his screen because he has more of the logistics of it. So it's I'll try to give the Reader's Digest version. I know it's been a while. The last time we were at the planning board was July 6th, and we had brought up the 75 Ridge Road plan. Brief summary of the project for those who don't remember. 75 Ridge Road, we have under agreement. It's about a 4-acre site where there is a large cleanup that needs to happen. There's plenty of trash, debris, oil, buildings. There's actually a car that need to get removed from the site before anything can happen to it. We discussed several different pathways based on the cost of the property, the cost of the cleanup, what would make sense there to be able to do. We tried a few ways by right. It didn't seem like anything was viable that way. We've actually come up with, we met with the town officials, I think twice since July 6th to kind of go over their thoughts, our thoughts, and how can we kind of brainstorm to get to figure out what is possible to do there. And we did see that Northborough does have an OSRD in its bylaws, the open space residential development. That was great to see because we've actually done that twice now. And come to find out, it's been in the bylaws in Northborough since I want to say 2008 or 2009, and no one's ever used it. So I guess we'd be the first. So it's something we know a lot about and we think would fit great on this site. The problem is that this site is in the RC district, and the OSRD bylaw is only for the RA and RB district in town. So what we're trying to propose here, we actually wrote a full zoning amendment, or Scott did, I should say, about how to implement the OSRD to add the RC district to the OSRD zoning overlay. And that is, we realize, a larger part of the town. What we're trying to accomplish with that is not only for this site, but for the rest of the town, give the planning board a lot more options to be able to approve sites that otherwise wouldn't have the ability to ever be done. And especially on sites like this, where it's a very, very difficult site with the cleanup that would have to happen. We think that this is the best pathway forward. So we did many calculations, Fred will tell you, last time we met with them, trying to figure out exactly how this could work and what the density would be and what the calculations would be. We figured out we could, with an OSRD, actually get as many as eight single families on the site. We actually reduced that on our own to all the way down to 5 at this point, just mostly because with 5, everybody's got a decent amount of yard space. It fits on the site very well. We just thought it would work a whole lot better that way. So with that, I kind of would like to hand it off to Scott, who's got a whole bunch more visuals to represent this and can show kind of our thought process to where we are up to date.
Great.
Hi, good evening, everyone. For the record, my name is Scott Cameron with the Moore and Cameron Group. We have offices for civil engineering and land surveying based in Haverhill and Danvers, Massachusetts. Thanks for having us again tonight. Second, me and Damon, thank you for setting the table well. Just to carry on with I guess the density conversation, we had been tinkering with some of the, I guess, the by right or implementing applying the current zoning to this property. Through through a few different mechanisms, special permits, multifamily, A&R, maybe a subdivision, we were coming up with, around 6 possible duplex units on the property. And that's where Damon's talking. It doesn't really make sense, for at least what he would want to build there. And it's not, we feel, something that's appropriate or fitting to the neighborhood or what we would want to do there. And then backing into what would fit well on the property at the 5 units, that does fit very well on this particular property, which is a little over 3.5 acres. And it also fits well with a 3-bedroom scheme, and ultimately what is we need to pay attention to, which is the groundwater protection overlay district, which does drive really the what you can do with the property when it's on a septic system, which this one would be. But if I could share screen, Madam Chair, I can bring up the zoning.
There you go. Mhm.
Did that pop up? So again, we've done a couple iterations of this. This is I took the existing zoning, copied and pasted it into a Word document, so we'd have something we could work with. This should be relatively brief. The big thing here is for open space residential design type projects, the RC district simply isn't in the current zoning as it's written. And I think, the main point here is we would like to propose, and Damon would like to petition that the RC be added into this district. And we made some recommendations in here to do so, and trying to fit something. The RC, of course, would be the half-acre or 20,000 square foot minimum lot area zoning district. So it's a little higher density than the others, and I'll get into that in a minute. But the first comment here is to Damon's point that we understand that nobody has filed an application under this district since it was put into place. And one of the planning principles that a lot of communities, and I'm sure you guys have read about it, is smart growth. The state has regulations. We're not suggesting smart growth here, but some of the zoning language can be extracted and is similar to developments that are or zoning tools that are intended to keep projects more efficient, so there's less sprawl, and create open space, as well as obviously the housing initiative, which is the ultimate goal. So on the first paragraph, the purpose of this district, I felt as a single paragraph. This is really the place to really embellish on what the intent of this is for. I more or less took this and started to just itemize it in a bulleted format, which can then be expanded upon. And one of the pieces I took out of smart growth, I added on to this, was to, again, that incentive to try and get developers to opt in and do such a development is to help ensure them that there will be a fair and predictable a process for getting through the permitting with the board. That's an important part, as we see really the soft costs of permitting a project these days going in the other direction. The cost is going up and up every single year as regulations get more complex. We get more detailed. We want to make sure every T is crossed and every I is dotted. But this is kind of some language that we see in smart growth, which is a newer tool, and really, wanting to get developers in working under and with the staff and the board under the, whatever initiatives the town has for a particular property. These red lines going through here, just adding resident C, and then really the bulk of the change, and there's not much in here to get us to an RC opt-in for the OSRD, is with the calculation on density. I finally, through Kathy's help, I finally figured out what the intent of the initial table. So to calculate a base density for the OSRD, it's a calculation. I was having a hard time figuring out how to apply this calculation. So I did try to put it into more, this is my engineering brain, but I think from an engineering or legal standpoint, this makes it more of an equation that is easier to follow here. And ultimately the yield that you get out of it, it takes kind of the total tract area, it subtracts out wetland areas, it subtracts out 10% of the total land, which you would assume would be going towards roads or driveways or access to the property. 10%, if you do look at a subdivision, the roadway is going to make up somewhere around 10% of the land is where that comes from. And then you have kind of a constant, which is your density bonus that would be worked into the OSRD to incentivize people to do the project. So in the RA, in the RB, currently that density, that modifier is a 1.5. So you take all these land area requirements, you do the equation, divide it by the zoning minimum. So in A and B, you'd have acre and acre and a half zoning, and then you multiply it times 1.5. And that's how you arrive at your base maximum number or base minimum number of dwelling units. What we discussed with staff was to use a smaller modifier of 1.1 because the zoning district is it's small lots, it's half acre, and we certainly don't want to see an equation that says you can put 20 homes on a property like this. That wouldn't make any sense at all. It wouldn't fit contextually in this neighborhood. So we did reduce that, and we also talked about another possible adjustment of reducing the RB district to 1.3. So in the RA, which is the biggest land area zoning district, you have your 1.5 modifier. The RB, the 1 acre would be a 1.3, and then the RC would be a 1.1. And that's just an adjustment to the calculation for the yield that this would allow. And then I provided an example below, which is also something you can include in the district just to give someone that is looking at it for the first time example of how the calculation would go forward. So this is just an example based on a 200,000 square foot property, assuming about a half an acre of wetlands, and then 10%, and then in the RC district of 20,000 square feet. So that would arrive at a density of about 9.3 units. And again, clarifying that when you end up in not a whole number, you always round down. That wasn't spelled out clearly in the zoning. That was just something that was in practice. But we did actually put that in here as well. And then a note, this is a carryover, but the burden of proof on the wetlands is by the applicant, and typically through an ANRAD. The rest of the changes, I did add a note in here to give the board a little more flexibility on some of this open space land. If the board did maybe deem that maybe they wanted to incorporate a parking area, for example, or a kiosk or whatever could be on this open space land, but giving them some opportunities to do that. Whereas currently it's written where you really can't do anything other than open space on it. So there's quite a limitation on pavement. If you wanted to do a parking area to get access for the public to the open space, it would just give some more flexibility there. And then that was it. We really didn't see any other changes to the zoning. It's relatively well written, and the big thing is just allowing the RC to join into it. So I think finally just reiterate that the groundwater protection district ultimately is going to protect the land and the density that you can do on any land, regardless of the zoning district. That is going to set what you can do, because it's based on the land area available and what you can load on wastewater for wastewater for those properties that are on septic systems. That's it. I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Fred, anything that you'd like to speak to or add?
Yes. We did meet with Damon and Scott, and I believe Ben was there. The staff's concern was that the minimum lot area requirement in RA is 80,000 and RB was 40,000, and by adding RC, which is only 20,000 square feet, that was where the discussion kind of came about modifying the factor, the additional unit factor at the beginning of that equation. We felt as though 20,000 was a pretty significant reduction in lot size, and that the original bylaw was intended to capitalize on getting maximum amount of open space in those larger lot areas up in the northern part of town where the terrain is a little bit more difficult to build, and that there'd be an opportunity for more open space to be given to the town, and try to get a developer to come along and do something in those areas and more of a cluster type thing. But as they both have stated, it's never been utilized. So clearly something needs to be done to entice people to take action with that, but still not overdeveloped.
Mhm.
So that was staff's main concern, was that we talked about possibly modifying the modification number at the beginning of the equation, the 1.1 in the smaller district, 1.3 in the 40,000 or the RB, and the 1.5 remaining in the RA. Thought that seemed reasonable because it was in proportion to the zoning requirements. The other thing that staff talked about in-house, we didn't actually mention it to Damon and to Scott, was that perhaps with a project like this, some kind of offsite mitigation within the same watershed of open space could be perhaps worked into the overall OSRD. So that, because in this particular case, it's a small site and the Conservation Commission may or may not be in favor of some of the improvements that they're talking about with a boat dock or some other things near the water. And it might be appropriate to have some open space improvements as long as they're within the same watershed, if they were in another location in town. And perhaps that's something that we can discuss further about how to incorporate that into the OSRD before it goes to town meeting, if the board's even in favor of considering something like that. It's a different way of thinking, but it might allow some more flexibility.
Okay. Any questions from the board for either the applicant or Fred? I have a question. So I see that Fred, it looks like staff recommended 1.3, but the ultimate proposal here does not include 1.3. It goes, both use 1.5. Fred, why would we want to consider the 1.3 instead of 1.5? Why did staff recommend that instead? Just to balance it in a way, or?
Yeah, it was to try to make it in proportion. Nobody's utilized it. But we felt as though if you're adding the RC district, which has the minimum lot size of 20,000, to have a 1.5 modifier for that seemed pretty excessive. And so we kind of kicked around what we thought might be reasonable. And at 20,000 square foot lots, 1.1 seemed like the appropriate modifier for the RC. And then it was just a matter of kind of proposing 1.3 for the middle range of the lot area and the RB. Certainly not, it's not something to kill the whole project on. It's something that could stay at 1.5. And if you want to add the RC district at 1.1, we just make a footnote. It was just a suggestion to kind of maybe balance it a little bit.
Okay, and Scott, so why did you go with 1.5? Is that just, you thought 1.3 wasn't necessary, or?
Frankly, it was, everything Fred's saying makes sense to me. But I think where we're trying to incentivize, I was a little cautious of taking away from a particular zoning district in those lands. It could result in people maybe trying to move to protect those rights. Whereas I think our hope is that this is going to help to further incentivize people to jump in, and maybe the RC project that's successful gets people to say, oh yeah, hey, look, I'm in an RA and I can do something similar. So that was the reason. We really don't have a bias either way.
Okay. My next question is, so I think, Damon, you started with saying that this particular edit or amendment to the bylaw would yield the ability for 8 houses to go in that space, but you're only proposing 5, correct?
Correct. Originally, we came up with 8. The houses would have only been about, I think, 40 feet apart. So it was a little bit tight. And again, like Scott said, we're also governed by the groundwater. So we want to make sure that we have enough bedrooms to do that properly. So with the 5 units, we would have 4 3-bedroom houses and 1 4-bedroom. house, and that allowed the shared septic system to be able to easily handle that amount of the amount of houses that's going to be there. The other thing too is we wanted to stick into part of the master plan. I mean, when I went to the town meeting when we first unveiled the master plan a few years ago, and the biggest thing that stuck out at me was that we wanted more little a affordable houses and not more capital A affordable houses. And so I don't know if you guys remember from the July 6th meeting, we showed you a bunch of houses from the other OSRD subdivision that we actually did. And all those houses were between 24 and 2,800 square feet. And we thought those were more, in line with what the master plan is kind of looking for, as opposed to, most new construction in town right now is like 3,500 square foot plus, up to 5,000. So we're trying to stay in line with the spirit of what the master plan, not downtown, obviously, in the rest of the town is going for. And 5, also the absolute minimum viable houses that we would have to make this project feasible for us or anybody really, because due to the size of the cleanup that's going to have to happen there.
Okay, so, but this calculation yielded the ability to do 8 houses in that spot. If you were to use this calculation, you could get 8 houses. Okay, so to me, that seems like too many houses there. So whatever this calculation is, it yielded a result that I actually don't like. So how do, maybe it's just a matter of taking a closer look, but so these calculations mean, this makes my brain a little.
Again, it's still governed by the groundwater calculations that you have to use. So, if we got 8 houses, they would all be 2 bedrooms. So obviously we didn't want to do that either. So that's how we came up with how we wanted to do it this way. But, because you're on a septic, you can only get so many number of bedrooms on the entire site. And so our calculation was, what is that, Scott, 16?
Mhm.
Yeah, 16 bedrooms. I think the calculation came out to actually this comes out to 7.5 for this site.
So just say if this were applied to another area and didn't have your same complications, if it was the same amount of space, 3 acres and some change, 8 houses would seem like a lot to fit in that space. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out what this calculation looks like, in other areas, not just, if we're to apply this bylaw, it would apply to everybody. So I would have to consider, and the board would have to consider clusters of this. What is that? If it's 8 houses and 3 acres, 3.5 acres of land, is that okay? So I guess we'd have to think about that.
I think the number of houses, so correct me if I'm wrong, but so I think if it's 20,000 square foot lot sizes at 3.5 acres, we came up with around 7.5. That leans to right around the 20,000 square feet. So we're pretty similar to
what you could do now.
The lot size. What the OSRD really does is it allows the board, which we have a lot of experience doing, is it allows for creative design, where, one of the best examples in my neighborhood directly across the street from me, we did one where we were able to get a park space with a playground right in the center. We were able to get a density bonus for it, but we were able to do something that was atypical. It's not really standard, was parking in the rear of the buildings, and all the houses sat on the park. And it's very successful. We got unanimous approval, no opposition in a town in Newburyport, which is, you have hundreds of people there a lot of nights. And it was kind of this ordinance kind of allows you where, 20,000 square feet is the standard, but that comes along with very just not creative design elements, and you can't really cluster the open areas. Everybody has the same amount. This was the one we just did was a perfect example of, we're able to get the same number of units, but able to cluster them in a way to get a centralized park. We actually have a playground. We had some public parking spaces that access the playground. So it kind of provides the board leeway to potentially approve more creative, flexible, neighborhood-friendly projects than just your standard straight down the line house formation. And that's kind of how we look at it.
Okay, any other board questions?
What is the name of the place in Newburyport, so we can just look it up and see?
So the first one was called the Reserve at Bashaw Farm. That's one that's single families that we got. We got that done last year, and then across the street, it's called the Stables at Bashaw Farm, which was it was very similar property. It was blighted. It was a trucking facility with just waste, and there was probably 30 or 40 shipping containers and excavators being stored there. It took them almost a year to clean the place out. And that's where we were able to, because we did the neighborhood across the street, we were able to get the little green space in the middle. And it provided, we're also in a farm. So it's actually the Reserve at Bashaw Farm. So one of the elements we provided was we actually recreated a barn that sits on the park. So when you drive down the street, the first thing you see is this, recreation of a really stylish old barn. And inside that barn, we were able to get 2 condo units with single families in the back, which in a normal neighborhood, it's a flexibility that wasn't able to do with standard zoning.
Okay, any other board questions? Well, Bob, you have a question?
Yeah, just a question for clarification. Can you spell Bashaw?
Bashaw, Bashaw, I think.
Bashaw.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bashaw Farm. So I think they have an
It's,
Instagram profile if you want to look. I don't know how much is online, but there's
if you can't find it, it used to be called Colby Farm.
yeah.
Colby. We found out actually the sellers who sold it to us, I think they didn't like their father-in-law named Colby, so they want us to rename it Bashaw.
No, what actually happened is the farm was always Bashaw Farm, but the Colby family has been leasing the farm for the last 5 years, and the town changed the road from Crow Lane to Colby Farm Lane, and they were all mad because they were just leasing the farm. It's actually not their family farm. So one of their contingencies was that their old farmhouse got rebuilt, and it's actually super nice now. That's remained on the end, and that everything was renamed as Bashaw to kind of preserve their family. Even though it's kind of weird, you pull on to Colby Farm Lane to get to the Reserve at Bashaw Farm. So there's a little bit of contentions going on. But if you guys have Instagram, I know my agent follows it. It's the one that with the park and stuff is stables at bashaw.farm and if you type in the stables at Bashaw Farm, you should pull up that account, and actually you'll see a red barn logo, and that's actually the barn that is kind of the centerpiece to the project. It's kind of a little logo portion of it.
Okay, I think what the board will probably have to take this back and read it. There's a lot here to read and go through. So I appreciate you bringing this forward. I think it, as a next step, will just warrant additional board review and discussion. And then if we wish to continue to pursue, bring it back in, and if there are any clarifications that need to happen, or maybe that goes through staff if that's possible as well. So I really appreciate you working through this.
That's great. Madam Chair, could I just leave you with a couple of quick statistics to jot down as you're looking at it? Because I know the density thing will always be a focal point. So we feel through 3 duplexes, frontage lots as a series of special permits. So let's say special permit. We feel 6 homes would fit on this property through the conventional zoning. If the unit modifier under this equation was just 1, so no density bonus, the calculation for 75 Ridge would come to 6.8. So you round down 6, we have the same number. And then with the 1.1, we end up coming to 7.5, so 7. So this is a density bonus of 1 unit on 6. And ultimately what we're saying is we're only going to do 5 because we don't want to do 2 bedrooms. We'd rather do 3 bedrooms. And the groundwater protection district ultimately controls what you can do on this particular property. So the sensitive areas under that overlay district are always going to control it. So I think that was important for you to know.
Thank you. Okay, great. I think you're still sharing. There you go. Okay, thank you. We will review further, and I'm not sure when Kathy's back, but either I'll reach out or someone on staff will reach out and keep you posted on further discussion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have George Pember regarding rezoning for 37 South Street. Oops, do we have him? Oh, there he is. Hi, George. Oops, I think you're on mute there.
All right,
There you
I'm
go.
muted and hopefully you can see me. Let's see.
Not yet, just your name.
There we go.
Okay, hello. Does anyone else need to come on with you or?
No, it's just me.
Okay, and then, let's see, hold on. There we go. Okay, all right, great. So you are presenting 437 South Street. We have about 20 minutes or so to get through. Hopefully that's enough time. I think you have something to share as well, an assessor's map. Did you need to share your screen at all?
I think Fred sent that to you already, so you guys should have that already.
Yep, do you want me to bring it up or?
Yeah, if you would, please.
Sure. Whoops.
So just as a little background on this, I came before the planning board pretty close to a year ago, 10 months ago, I believe. And at that time, you guys were preparing for the town meeting and were concerned that you didn't have enough time to study this. And you asked if I would postpone it for a year, which I agreed to do. So I'm back now for try number 2.
Here we go. Can everybody see this, the map?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Okay. So the parcel in question is marked in red, number 37. It's on the left-hand side of your screen. And you can see what we're talking about is a parcel that, now what you're looking at, I should preface this, is the old assessor's map. This is not the current map. And you can see that the dividing line goes right between the side, if you will, so that part of the property is in the downtown area, part is in the residential area. Now, this building has been used commercially for years and years and years. It was originally used by a Dr. Bush, I believe it was. And then Bob Gabriel bought the building and moved his law office in here. And then there were several iterations of the law firm. It was Bob, and then his nephew Richard joined him, and then Richard's brother David joined them, and then Bob left, and Dick bought the building out, and Dick rented it to several other attorneys. So over the years, it's been used commercially. What we discovered fairly recently, which is why we're before the board, is that when the town rezoned, the boundary line between the two districts, the downtown business district and the residential district, was moved closer to the center of town. So instead of bisecting our property, it actually is on the boundary line between our property and the next one closer to the center of town. I don't think Mr. Gabriel, who was the current owner of the property, had any idea that that had happened. And he just kept doing what he was doing before, which was renting it out for office space to mostly to attorneys, but occasionally there were other people in. I believe that there's a builder that has some space in there right now. So he had a massage therapist that wanted to go in, and we made all the arrangements for the, he had the lease drawn up and everything else. And then it turns out that, well, actually they weren't allowed to be in there because this was zoned residential. And so we had to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and get a variance in order to put them in there. So the purpose of coming before you tonight is to see if we can move that zoning line to the outside edge of our property instead of the inside edge. So it's further away from the center of town to include this property in the downtown business area. It's not like we're trying to repurpose a building. We have a building in there that's been used commercially for years. And we want to be able to continue that without having to run to the Zoning Board of Appeals every time a new tenant goes in there. So I don't want to make it any more complex than that. I guess that's about as simple as it should be.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
How
It is
how
a
many
good quick
tenants
one.
are in there now? Just out of,
That depends on who's renting what space in there and how many vacant spaces are there. I think there's room probably for about 6 different tenants. And I believe right now there's only about 4 of them in there.
Mhm.
And somebody could end up taking 2 or 3 office
Sure.
spaces, in which case you'd have a much smaller number.
Okay.
I have a question. Did you reach out to the residential neighbors and see if they had any opposition to this?
We haven't done that yet, no.
What is the current lot line? So this is from 1988, it looks like. Is there an updated version or today's version of this?
So the current lot line, the northerly boundary of the property, that's the boundary that's closest to the center of town, is the dividing line between the 2 zoning districts,
Okay.
meaning that the entire parcel is now in Residence C.
Oh, I see. So this line, can you
Yeah.
see my
The line.
cursor? I don't know why
Yes,
it says
exactly.
AB. Okay, so this one moved down to here. So the lot is no longer, oh no, that's not correct.
The other way.
It's not, no, it's just the opposite.
Oh,
The
Okay.
bisecting line moved north toward the center of town.
okay,
And
Got
what
it.
we're asking for is to rezone it, to move it back down to the southerly boundary line.
okay. So I think one thing we were trying to figure out last time is why was it carved out this way? Do we have any, I know you went to the trouble of getting the old assessor's map, but do we have anything on why that was even carved out in that way? Obviously, seeing that as a business that's been happening since 1988, why we would zone it that way?
I'm embarrassed to say I was on the planning board at the time we did that, and I don't remember. So that's an honest answer for you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
know
I
that
think the
we,
last
we-
meeting, Kathy and Michelle said they just tried to get rid of all the split lots, but they didn't,
yeah,
I don't know if anyone knew why they went one way or the other.
But even in 1988, though, that was not a residential use, correct?
correct. That's right. Yeah. It was a law office, well, a series of law offices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what a weird thing to split it the other way.
Yeah.
Okay, so bylaw, if we were to propose a bylaw, what does this look like? Do you have something drafted for that, or is that something we'd have to draft?
That's something that I would work with Kathy on. Would come up with some exact language that I think would work. But basically, we just want to take this parcel and put it into the downtown business zone rather than the residential C zone, which it's sitting in right now.
Okay. Any other board questions or questions from staff? Bob?
That parcel next to it, I believe it looks like number 7 is residential.
Yes, it is. That's the Hunt's property.
Okay.
Okay, and Bob, you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple of points of clarification. The property that it's in, and I'm on the GIS mapping system right now. The property that you're talking about is currently in GR, which is general residential, and not residential C.
I apologize.
That's okay. And I've got 2 questions for George as an attorney. That, you know, if they were to take and rearrange the zoning line to include this one lot, how close are we to calling that spot zoning and having an issue with the Attorney General when they go to review this?
I think you can make an argument that it's spot zoning, but I think what we're trying to do is just correct an oversight from the past rather than do spot zoning.
Yeah, I mean, what you're doing, I think, is a smart move. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Sure,
And
I understand.
In that, you know, because typically when the AG's office looks at one lot or one parcel, you know, sometimes they can throw up a red flag. The other thing, and I'll just let the board know this, is that they're proposing going from general residential to downtown business. And although the current use of the building is attorneys and engineers and things like that, and it's a pretty benign use, downtown business opens up a whole nother category of potential businesses that could go in there by right. And I would just make the board aware that there's residences around the area. And,
Yeah.
you know, I know the term unintended consequences has been floated around out there. But this is something that you just want to keep an eye out on, something like that.
Okay.
All right, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from board members? I can't see everybody at once.
Hi, Carrie, it's Fred.
Oh, hi, Fred. Yep.
I just had a couple of comments. I wanted to possibly alleviate Bob's concern about spot zoning. In a former life, I was a planner in Shrewsbury, and we had a similar thing happen where the town meeting went to move a zone line. And on the floor of town meeting, the neighbor asked if their land could be included in that. And while I didn't necessarily think it was appropriate, our town council said it was fine. And ultimately, the Attorney General's office allowed the line to move over one more lot. So it wasn't considered spot zoning in that regard. And I think that's similar to what's happening here. And it's a simple map amendment. It doesn't even require much of a bylaw in terms of wording. I think, George, we can work with George if the board is amenable to it, to just re-describe how the line transcribes between South Street and the railroad, just indicate the meets and bounds of a map amendment, and it would be simple enough.
Okay, great. Any other questions here?
Does this have to notify abutters? I would think it would.
I'm sure it does, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to maybe reach out even informally to abutters just to give us a sense, like, is there any concerns? And then Bob brought up the issue of, you know, this just opens up different uses over there, that it would be interesting to hear if there are any other issues or concerns about it.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely reach out to the Hunts, who are the next door neighbors.
Yeah, yeah. Is that something the board would be interested in? Amy, it sounded like you were interested to hear.
Yeah, definitely, because there are a lot of uses. It could go from a lawyer's office to a brew pub. And the Hunts might not like that.
Which is or something at night, which is a much different story than a residential lawyer's office use.
Yeah.
Which now, George, you said there's a variance there right now. What is the variance for? What does it allow?
I think it's for a massage therapist.
Yeah.
So they could continue on as a massage therapist or even a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The dilemma is if someone wants to move in there under the current system, we have to say, well, we have a space that's available for you. We'd love to have you rent it, but you have to go to the zoning board of appeals and get a variance first. And as you know, that's a process that takes at least 2 months, maybe a little bit longer. And if you're looking for space to rent, and you want to get started, you don't want to have somebody say, sorry, you got a 2 month delay, minimum 2 month delay. Because, you know, by the time you file your application and get your hearing and then go through the mandatory appeals period, you know, you're at least 2 months, if not 3. And that's a, you know, that makes it awfully hard to rent a place.
How many square feet is it?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the assessor's information to get that. I may have that.
Don't worry about it. I can look it up.
Okay.
What is number 5? I should have looked that up, but I don't know. What is that building? Yeah. What is there currently?
It used to be like Benoit, where they lawyer language. It was a dentist a long time ago.
Yeah, they may still is it still Benoit?
Yeah, that's the last I remember. But it was it's a smaller house, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
With other lawyers and things like that.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so it sounds like the board, as a next step, the board will take this back, discuss further. If you have anything from the hunts of number 7 there, that would be interesting to see. Otherwise, it doesn't sound like there are any additional technical questions at this point. So unless there's any other information, I think we have all we need at this point, unless any other board member needs any other information.
I have one question, and this may not be able to be answered, but does it change the appraisal value of the property if you go from residential to downtown? Or the assessed tax real estate value?
It might.
Okay.
And I think if the assessors realized that it was currently zoned in the residential area, that they might be entitled to some sort of a abatement on the taxes,
Mm-hmm.
which they haven't applied for and don't, there's no intent to apply for that.
Okay, I was just curious.
Okay. Okay, anything else, George, that you want to add?
No, I think we're all set on that. Thank you. Appreciate your
Okay.
time tonight.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming back around with this, and we'll be in touch.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, so why don't we come back around to the minutes? I'm sorry, not the minutes, the rest of our bylaws, proposed bylaws, and get through the rest of the agenda, unless we just want to dive in. Bob, are you only here for a certain amount of time? Would you prefer? Oh, I can't hear you. You know, maybe we'll just stick with the bylaws because we do have Bob here, so that'll be helpful while he's here to make sure that if we have any questions, I know some of the bylaws we wanted some feedback on.
Yeah,
So why don't we stick? Yeah.
I can stay for as long as you need me.
Okay, great. Let's see, I'm gonna pull up, why don't we just continue the discussion while we're on bylaws to make sure we get that in there. Okay, at this point, I think we are, you know what I was gonna use actually? I thought Melanie did a nice job with the October minutes and it really outlined where we stood for each item. So I'm gonna pull that up. And while I'm looking for that, I know, why don't we start with sober homes, because that I think we have been looking for feedback. Bob, I don't know if you've had a chance to, if Kathy's updated you with any of the bylaws that we've been discussing or questions. I know Millie, I think, has maybe reached out as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have been watching all the meetings and whatnot, and Millie sent me an email wanting to know if I'd seen or heard anything out there in the world about sober homes. And I just responded earlier tonight. I haven't seen anything from Boston, either in terms in the building code world or in the zoning world, about how to deal with them. In terms of zoning, they're a protected class under the Dover Amendment, and they're federally protected as well. So, you know, in terms of having any kind of control over where they go, there is no control. Is there any site plan or reasonable stuff to look at, you know, parking, lighting, whatever? These are treated as single family homes. And about the only thing we can do is, you know, through the building code, you know, ensure the safety of the residents, you know, whether it's a sprinkler system or things like that. They do not have to meet AAB requirements, but some houses do that voluntarily because they're a single family home. There are no requirements for parking. So there's very little you can do in terms of zoning. The building code has its own issues, you know, with safety.
Yeah.
There is one case in terms of taking an existing home and ordering it to be sprinkled I think that was out of Fitchburg or somewhere up in the northern part of the state. I'll be honest, I have not had time to dig up that report and read it. I would say, you may want to reach out to CMRPC and see if they have anything and what some of the other towns may or may not have been able to do. Most of the issues that I've encountered with these places is the renovation of an existing building and making sure it's sprinkled and all this other stuff. So that's essentially building code, which is away from zoning.
Right.
So, again, it comes down to the use and the residents being a protected class and what can be done, for that, which is, I don't think there's a lot that can be done. That's why I'm saying if you reach out to CMRPC, they may have something. And if they do, I'd be interested in seeing it because I think the building/zoning officers out there are all like you guys. We're kind of lost. We're not quite sure what kind of controls can be put on it, if any.
Yeah.
Okay, so Millie, where does this leave your thought process? Do you want to continue to pursue, or do you think?
I'm going to put it again, probably on a back burner, but start a communication with CMRPC and just continue to see, I guess, when stuff starts to come into active regulations, if that's what happens, we'd certainly want to be, I think, on top of that.
Okay, so withdraw for this year?
Yeah.
Okay, next up, breweries. Amy, this is you.
I think I'm going to wait for Kathy because she was, looking into it last we talked. And since she's not here tonight, I just wanted to, hear from her. I think we left it with her with a couple questions.
Okay, anything for Bob while he's here on that?
Not really, no.
Okay. Okay, Anthony, signs. Oops, you're muted there. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared. I'm not ready to withdraw. So if I can pull something together by the next meeting, I'd like to pursue.
Okay, home occupation. Bob, this might be, I don't know, you and Kathy were meeting about possible item for home occupation about the number of trucks and vehicles. Is that something that's still coming forward from staff?
Yeah, right now we have, I think there's a regulation, and I could be a little foggy. I think for home occupation allows a certain amount of commercial vehicles. But in terms of just general, if somebody comes home with a commercial vehicle, is that allowed? Okay, and how many of those can be done? Say, for example, say if Anthony works for a landscaping company and the landscaper wants Anthony to take the truck and trailer home at night, but Anthony's not running the business out of his home, he's just working for somebody else, but he takes home a commercial vehicle. Is that allowed, and how many plated vehicles would be allowed? Because that's something that is actually not addressed in the zoning code. Okay. Sometimes you'll have a, over the road trucker who has his own tractor, and he's home for a couple of days. Can he do that? It's we've had that question a couple of times.
Okay.
So typically it's because two has been allowed in other parts of the zoning code. I've been kind of extending that to, currently what's being used, and I think some clarification would help a lot.
Okay, so that's still coming forward. That's something that staff is drafting still. Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll put a place marker for that still.
Yeah, there's going to be probably a couple more, and I'm going to do a little bit of research. One of them is the height of fences.
Okay.
Currently, the town allows 6 feet. I think the building code allows it for 7. I may propose a change. Do we allow that to go to 7 feet in the zoning? The other thing was, there was last year, Fred and I were working on some sort of flood, federally required flood language in the zoning code, which would change what we currently have. And it's essentially boilerplate, but it's something that's required to be done.
Huh.
And I think Fred and I will be working on it to bring it forth this year.
Okay. And for the fences, so that is a matter of allowing fences to be 7 feet.
Yeah, currently the height limitation is 6.
Okay.
The building code allows for 7. This would allow, the zoning and the building code to be kind of in sync with each other. The other thing is when you buy a pre-made piece of fencing at Home Depot, whatever, it's going to be 6 feet tall. By the time you install it with a little bit of space at the bottom, it could be anywhere from 6 to 7 feet. And if somebody wants to really split hairs, 6 feet to 6 feet. And, giving the extra foot might give people a little bit more relief. Because I do get calls. They says, the limitation is 6 feet, but the panel is 6 feet, which means that I have to dig it into the ground to make it comply. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're just
All right.
adding a little comfort. That's all.
All right, so height of fences, the mandatory flood language, home
Yeah.
occupation, so all of those are 3 placeholders.
Yeah.
Okay. Any board questions on those 3 items? Okay.
What actually does the mandatory flood language cover, or what does that entail?
It's been a while since I've read it, but it's it talks about who the flood administrator is and some of the other framework around it. Again, it's been almost a year since I've read it.
Okay.
And I wasn't really prepared to answer that tonight.
No.
Actually, Millie, I believe that it's some language that the federal government requires us to have in order for homeowners to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. It allows them to make claims as long as we're a participating community. We're current right now. We made some changes due to the map changes that they proposed. I think it was back in 2016, and a couple of years before that, there was some wording changes that they required us to make. It's just in keeping with what they're requiring us to do from the federal government and make sure that the residents are eligible for that National Flood Insurance Program.
Okay, that helps.
Fred's memory is better than mine.
Okay, next I have on here, we talked about the moratorium. And one action item for the board that I will initiate is that if we were to move forward with this bylaw, we would need to then define what problems we hope to solve by the moratorium. So what were our concerns that we'd be addressing in that time period? And so what we needed to do is just pull together that list of concerns. If the concerns are big enough and broad enough, then maybe we pursue the moratorium. If there's an instance where we're really not coming up with that list for whatever reason, then I think we start to look at our definitions at a minimum. So we also talked, there are 2 options for this one, 2 pathways. There's either a moratorium pathway or just possibly evaluating and modernizing our definitions that are around trucking, warehouse. If we need to add anything, modify it. Those are the 2 paths for there. So I'll take that next piece for concerns. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on this one or thoughts on best ways to proceed?
So are you looking for input from each of us on that elements of that, about what problems we hope to solve? Or
yeah, so if we're in a moratorium period of a year, whatever that is, what will we be doing in that time? What will we be researching, or what will we be, trying to address, or what are the issues that we're feeling that we need this moratorium? And if they are not there, if those issues aren't there, then do we then switch our focus to definitions?
I think one additional thing that I noticed out of Sutton was the list of criteria they had when they came up with a decision for the trucking and distribution. And there was a whole list of criteria that had to do with traffic. And I was going to look into some of that too, the criteria.
Okay.
That was Sutton?
Uh-huh. It was emailed out to you guys probably a month or two ago. I could resend it.
Yeah,
So
I
then-
remember that. I just wasn't sure if that was the town, Sutton. I remember that.
Yeah.
So then I guess to that point, it could be something like to research, or, consider different criteria, or do we need to make modifications to our criteria and take that time to, is that moratorium period to do things like that, research what other towns are doing, or what's happening in the region, how other people in the region are handling it. It's huge within our whole region, and do we want to take time to look at that information? I think would be, it doesn't have to be a concern as black and white as there's too much traffic, right? It could be something a little more about what we need to solve, the research we would want to do, the things at the end of the moratorium that we'd want to come to the table with as possible solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to send that to the board to send back any of your concerns.
Okay.
Research.
One thing I was going to forward to, maybe I'll forward to you, Carrie, to forward to the board, is when we talk about the open space residential district. Right before COVID, there was a man, I forget his name, Randall, but he's like an expert in the field. And Kathy said he's just so good about the open space residential. And Harvard is redoing their open space residential. So I was on there today looking at it. And the 2-hour class I went to, which was really informative, is actually on their website. So I was going to forward to it. So if you're thinking about for the next meeting about open space residentials, and they talked about formulas and they had pictures, and it had a real lot of information that I can send the link out and you can share it. It's like a 2-hour class, but it was good.
Yeah, I
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
So then along those lines, we had that presentation this evening on 75 Ridge Road. Any additional comments at this time? So we'll take a look at that, Amy's link.
Yep.
Any other thing that we'd want to add?
And I do know, like, sometimes when a town does a zoning change, like Kathy was talking about when Mr. Hutchins came forward, you want to think about sometimes do like a build out scenario. So how is this going to affect the town? Like how large is the density going to grow? If this is opened up in RC,
right?
How many properties will it affect? And, what's the big concern? Like if there are not groundwater properties, and, how it will affect the schools and the municipality. I saw that in another town too, and they were just doing a multi-family bylaw, but they were going to have to do a build out analysis just to see what that would add to their town and if they could handle it.
Okay, so that's jumping to Brigham Street. That was we're waiting for information from.
Well, I was wondering with this too, the OSRD, if you do new zoning for an OSRD, how's that going to affect the density in the town overall?
Any initial thoughts on that from staff, or is that something we'd have to really play out with maps and all of that?
We're gonna need some maps.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty large district, so.
But you want to think about unintended consequences.
Right.
Okay. And then for the Brigham Street property, we had talked about, we were waiting for some data back from the MIS department. I don't think Kathy sent anything. Did she send anything to staff at all with updates from that department? Okay. So maybe at the next meeting, we can resolve that.
Kathy was looking into something for me too. It was about the build out analysis. We talked about the master plan, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there were so many parcels left in industrial. And I think she was going to do some maps on which pieces were left. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll email her and double check.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Moving along here. Okay, groundwater is a hold, it looks like was our last step. Amy, is that
Yeah.
still true? Yeah.
Yeah, well, first I'm gonna hold that off for last because we can talk about that with the letter.
Okay,
But
sure.
I had emailed you something about enforcement, which is good because Bob's here. I don't know if you can pull it up. I think you sent it out to the board last week.
I did?
I think so.
Okay, hold on.
I could try. Do you want me to pull it up?
Yeah, if you have it there, I just have a minutes pulled up to try to go through our next steps, but hold on. Do you have it handy?
Yeah, I just want to see what I named it so I know which one to open. They all start with 2022 bylaws. I should put the other part first.
Oh, yeah, I have it, Amy. Do you want me to pull it up or you have it?
Oh, sure. Either way.
All right, so hold on, let's see.
I'm pretty sure it went out to everybody. I don't know if people had a chance to read it. But at the top, I have a summary.
Oops. Sorry about that.
Wait, Amy, when did you send this out?
I think it was last week. But it came, I think I sent it to Carrie as chair, and I think she sent it to everybody.
I wonder if I ended up sending it, Amy. I'm sorry, I may not have.
Oh,
I thought, now I can't remember.
I think I saw it.
You did? Okay.
so at the top, there's a summary. We now have like an enforcement section of our bylaw. And there's 3 sections: the general, the enforcement request, and the penalty for violation. So what I was doing is I was leaving part A as the general. I was leaving that alone. It states that the building inspector, Mr. Federico, is charged with enforcement of the bylaw. And then B, enforcement request. I was reviewing that with a lot of different towns. Right now, our enforcement request says that if someone sends a letter to Mr. Federico, he shall notify the party requesting the enforcement if he's not going to act on it. Where all the other towns I was reading, it said if the building inspector is informed by written request, or even he has reason to believe that any provision of the zoning bylaws or a permit, which a lot of towns use, but ours didn't. So if someone is, not following a condition, it also says that it's not just the bylaws, it's a permit is being violated, then the building inspector shall make or cause to be made an investigation of the facts, including inspection of the property where the violation may exist. And if he finds a violation, then he shall give immediate notice in writing to the owner of his duly authorized agent and to the occupant of the premises. So it's putting into writing, and Mr. Federico does it a lot now, that if there's a zoning violation, that he has to notify the owner and the occupant. But if there isn't, then he'll give written notice to the person who makes a complaint, the same way that he was doing before. But what this does is it's not just a violation of the zoning bylaws, but it's also a violation of like a special permit or a variance that has been issued. I noticed that in a lot of other towns, and versus ours, it just was if you don't find anything, and then you have to tell the person you're not doing anything.
Okay. Go ahead, Bob. Do you have a comment? Go ahead.
Well, replacing B with what you're proposing is stating the obvious in terms of what is required of a building inspector or zoning enforcement officer. What's currently in B is literally in chapter 48. Replacing with B is basically what is universally understood to be done anyway. And that has been, basically all you're doing is putting into words, what is required anyway. One of the things is that, immediate notice in writing, need a little time for that. Some of these zoning violations are urgent and some of them are not urgent. And, to have me write that immediately, that all I'd be doing is zoning. There's not enough for me to go around.
Yeah.
I would say probably within 7 days or something like that, or within a certain amount, or within a reasonable time.
Can we
the other
change
thing
that?
is,
Carrie, do you mind updating it? Just because that's fine too. Like half that I read said immediate and half said, within a 7-day period. So.
Okay, so I'll just put a note here and I'll just, oh, shoot, it's a duplicate. I can't edit it yet. It's a duplicate copy.
And one of the other things is, and Amy kind of pointed out that, when a special permit or a variance is granted, and even when design review and site plan has been granted, okay, that in effect becomes the zoning requirement for that particular parcel of land or project or whatever. Okay, so once that comes down and it's in, and then everything is wrapped up in either a special permit or a variance, I own enforcing the whole thing. It's already in there. Okay. Similar to, Amy, this is a little off track, but it's the cell tower up off of West Main Street. Okay, it took the guy 2 years to comply. I had to withhold building permits and other certificates for him to comply with what was originally in the plans. Okay. And they've got a lot more lawyers than we do, but we were able to get it done in the end. But like you said, like I said before, any conditions, the actual map and the approved site plan, that all becomes required under zoning. So what you wrote is already in play.
We had been talking about it with Kathy for a while, like different enforcement. So that's why I went and I looked at the other towns for enforcement. And ours was the only one that didn't have a lot of this in it. So I thought, if it's already in play, it doesn't hurt to just spell it out, because it helps someone like me understand it, because I don't go and read the building code or,
right.
So is it more like to provide air cover for, obviously this is happening anyway, but it just puts it so everybody has this understanding. And
right.
Yeah.
Also like an applicant. So if Mr. Federico wrote a note and, he has something to fall back on, it's right in the zoning bylaws.
Okay, and then the next part, you change, these are in addition?
Yeah, we had talked about it. I think we asked Kathy, like each violation of these bylaws shall constitute a second offense. That was in a lot of the other towns too. Because someone had asked that question a couple of months ago. Because ours says each day, is it each day is an offense or is each violation offense? And actually the bylaw I looked at had both of the sentences, that each violation and each day is considered an offense. And Bob's nodding yes. So
if
I just think it didn't hurt to add them in.
If you've got multiple violations, which can be cited in the zoning code, each violation and each day is a new offense.
Yep, it wasn't written in our bylaws, so I just added it. And then the last one I added D, which a lot of towns have. You actually mentioned about the cell tower. They go one step further, like you said. You had to pull revoke a building permit if it gets to the point where the monetary violations aren't doing anything. It says the building inspector may revoke any permit issued to the occupation of the premises.
Okay, that's going to be an issue because that steps on the toes of the building code as well. So there would be issues with that. And if we were to go to court, the court is going to want me to split hairs about what is going on with building versus zoning. So I think that's going to be problematic. If we do this sort of thing, what we do is we go straight to town council and have them do a injunction or restraining order or whatever it is they do, or an order to correct, and have it done through the courts. So we don't even bother revoking permits, because if they're gonna ignore stuff like that, and we have cases that are doing that now, anything I do, they're not gonna pay attention to. They're gonna tell me to go pound sand. Your best off is just to go straight to the judge and have him make an order.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it says that in the second to last sentence. It says an injunction or order.
Yeah, but you're asking me to revoke a permit first, and may make complaint to the Superior Court. Like I said, by the time a situation gets to this point, there's no hope, and they're not listening to me or the town, and maybe they'll listen to the judge. Case in point, Santa Anza. Okay, we can write fines all day long, and he's gonna, decorum prohibits me from saying what he would tell us to do. But literally, they told us, I'm not doing anything unless the judge tells me to do it. So, like I said, when a situation gets to this point where I have to revoke a permit, I don't even bother, just go straight to the attorneys and have them send it to the judge.
Okay.
Because at that point, no amount of municipal fines is going to do anything.
Right. That's why I added this, because the other towns had it. And it says may revoke a permit and may make a complaint or an injunction. So you're saying having it in writing doesn't matter, or?
I don't think it's going to help, to be honest. I mean, it's.
Well, I guess I'm thinking as a business, if I were running a business and I didn't have a permit, then my insurance would certainly give me a problem.
Well, the thing is this, I don't talk to insurance companies, and insurance companies don't talk to me unless there's been an issue. And 90% of the time, if there is an issue, they don't talk to me anyway. They just pay the claim. And so I'm not charged with alerting any mortgage company or any insurance company or any other civil authority in terms of issues that are going on. I can't write the mortgage owner and say, what they're doing is a violation of the zoning code or the building code. If they call me and ask me, I can tell them. Yeah. But it's not my wheelhouse to go tattling on something like that.
Yeah. No, I just
wanted to add it to give you more teeth, and I guess you have the teeth right now, but I think as a person on the outside to see that there and know that you have that ability, it might help. It may help a person who's reading it and reporting a violation, and it may help a person who is violating, because they can say, oh, he could pull my permit, or he could, I don't know. I was just trying
I understand, putting it in there so it clarifies what can happen. And I think that's a pretty wise idea. A lot of people claim ignorance of the law, and there's no excuse. Excuse me. But I would certainly want to run this through town council before it gets set up on a zoning town meeting article. Sorry, I'm tired.
Okay, well, I could email this to you after the meeting or during the meeting. I could try to email it.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so I'm going to switch back over. Amy, you're going to share that. We'll get some additional input there. I also have for use variances. So my next item for that is just getting a joint meeting with the ZBA. So I think we've done that before in January. So I don't think it would happen at our next meeting, but I'll invite the ZBA for a discussion, and we can talk through the bylaws, and obviously that's one of them. So that would be the next step there. Anything else on that? I feel like I'm missing one.
We're talking about commercial.
Oh,
in-
the overlays. Yep. Yep. Okay. So the last time we talked, I thought it was in here as well. We talked about, here it is. We talked about the merits of, in our industrial districts, to open up some additional uses. The merits of either extending a commercial development overlay district so that it would open up commercial uses, or identifying uses that may work well in industrial. For example, in the past, we had the indoor recreation that was commercial, once just commercial, we opened it up in industrial. We soon thereafter got the soccer field application over on Cedar Hill. So that sort of, I think that sort of thinking is what we had here. Let's see. The last action item we had for here was figuring out in terms of revenue, any impact industrial versus commercial. I think we weren't clear on whether there was what the town, in terms of revenue we would get, what if we change those uses to commercial, would it really have an impact? Does industrial bring in a significant revenue that couldn't be replaced or replicated by commercial? So there was a financial component, but then just in general, does anyone else have any additional thoughts or comments on whether or not we look at uses or an overlay here?
I mean, I guess my question becomes, what are the pros and cons of having an overlay district? I know some towns are trying to move away from them.
Yeah, I think in this case, we wondered, would it just provide that full sweep of commercial uses versus picking out uses? And a lot of times an overlay, in my understanding, has a benefit on, there would be some sort of benefit to the other side as well. I don't think that's currently defined in our current overlay district. No, this is not a district that exists. We would have to do this is not the major. One thing we looked at was doing that major business development overlay. And I think we decided that wasn't the right solution because that particular one was built for Northborough Crossing. And that's not something we were trying to replicate. This would be more like a new commercial development overlay that would just allow the commercial uses in industrial.
Mm-hmm.
The alternative to that would be just picking out some uses that could work well in an industrial district. Any thoughts? Or Bob, if you have any thoughts on that, might be hard coming in without.
One I thought of, because I did put it out there and I asked people, and some people are like, oh, I'd like a Trader Joe's or like a supermarket. Like we probably had supermarkets in our bylaws before Stop and Shop tried to go downtown. And as far as I can see now, I don't think we have any supermarkets, and I don't know if that would be a high revenue use in industrial and less traffic, or if it would be more traffic. I guess it'd have to be something to think of.
Well, I think the problem we were trying to solve for is that we keep getting the same things in our industrial districts, and we keep, having issues with the traffic or what's happening in our industrial districts. And if we were to have more, if we were to open it up for more options, it would just, rather than just say we did a moratorium on trucking and warehouses. So that takes one component away from industrial. So rather than just take things away from there, could we just make better uses that we still are using that land, we're allowing development, we're allowing revenue to come to the town, but it's just a use that's more beneficial for both sides.
Right. And we had talked last year, a lot of towns have like different levels of industrial where closer to neighborhoods, it's like a low impact industrial, and then it gets more heavy industrial the further away it gets.
Right.
So,
I think that's
I wonder if that's something we have to ask, like, who would know? Like, does CMRPC have an economic development person that could come in for 2 hours and say, these are the uses that are really make residents happy and it brings in higher revenue? Because since we've been on the board for a couple of years, I feel like lately the majority are contractor yards, and after a while you'll have too many, and they're not bringing in the same revenue as like an Iron Mountain, or even like I saw that the 2 nursing homes in town bring in a lot of revenue,
Mhm.
but they're not impacting the schools. And I would get the same thing. I feel like we have so few things in industrial, and a lot of those things are what people complain about. So we should look for better uses that will make people happy.
Mhm.
As happy as you can get. But I think it would be great to talk to someone who's up and coming in economic development that might have some ideas. Like, do you know, Carrie, through CMRPC, do they have an economic development group?
Not a group, but there's some resources there that I wonder if we could have come in and just talk to us a little bit about what that looks like. So just that we have more information, and, you know, if it's something that can happen this year or next year, whatever the case, at least we'd have that information.
Because I always bring it up, but that one solar meeting I went to, and I was talking to that woman, and she's like, you guys have, you know, great schools, a high in demand town. You guys can do better. You know, she goes, you can do better than contractor yards.
Mm.
But she didn't tell me what.
Yep.
I'd love to know what ideas.
Okay. Did I miss anything? I think that was it. Well, then, of course, we have the 37 South Street to consider. So I think we just need a little bit more there on specifically the abutters, and just I'd be interested to see a map of today. I think that's everything for this. Anything else?
Well, I had talked about the groundwater here and there. And
Oh,
then,
yeah. So, yep. So go ahead, Amy. We wanted to save that for last. Okay.
Yep. And then we know that in Fred's here today too, that the groundwater committee is going to talk about a letter. And because we've been talking about groundwater probably for months now. And I went out and I don't know if Fred heard this because he wasn't at our last couple meetings, but I looked at 100 towns in the region, and only one town I found had a groundwater committee. And they did a lot. They looked at applications, but they also they delved deep into it. But my concern with having a groundwater committee and voting on the same special permit criteria as the special permit granting authority, it seems to be you can't have 2 committees voting on the same thing. And if you read our bylaws, I'm just going to open it up to the groundwater section. Our bylaws say, after notice and public hearing and weighing the comments and recommendations of the Groundwater Advisory Committee, the special permit granting authority may grant such special permit provided that it finds it meets the proposed use. And then it lists the 3 criteria. And it also talks in a different section about simplicity, reliability, feasibility. But in our bylaws, it doesn't say it's the groundwater committee that's voting on these. It's a special permit granting authority, because the groundwater committee is advisory. So when I looked up the other towns, Sherborne was the one that had a groundwater committee, and they proposed their letter. They said, should the groundwater advisory committee, no, should the special permit granting authority grant the special permit, we would recommend these conditions. And that way you don't have 2 boards voting. Like, it should be the special permit granting authority voting on a special permit, but not an advisory committee. An advisory committee is supposed to make recommendations. And I was trying to think about this today. Like, as Fred knows, if there's a special permit, you have to list the complete list of all chemicals and pesticides with the sheets. And there's 5 criteria. The last one is an analysis by a technically qualified expert. Like, they could have a checklist and go off that they did get the analysis by the technically qualified expert. They did meet the items that are needed for the application. And then state, should the special permit granting authority grant the special permit, we would recommend these conditions. I just, as the special permit granting authority, I don't think the advisory committee should be voting.
Okay, so wait, this is as it relates to a bylaw or as it relates to a memo?
Oh, this is the memo. Sorry, I have the memo out. You know, the bylaw I was doing was if it was a legal liability and we had two boards voting on the same criteria, then one of them should be deleted. The other towns did not have a groundwater advisory committee. It would just be Fred's memo would come to the planning board. And then the planning board would read Fred's letter, and Fred's letter always says, you know, the person met this, that, and the other thing. Fred's really good with going down the criteria and the conditions. And then we would be the ones to vote. And take out the middleman if they're not doing anything that we're not doing. So then I think Jason, as the chair, was listening to our meetings, and he did go and he did change how the memo was stated, which I thank him for doing. And so now in front of the groundwater on their agenda, they're going to review how they want to word the memo. But as the special permit granting authority that the memo is coming to, I thought maybe as a committee, we would want input. What do we want from our advisory committee?
Okay, so Anthony, you're the groundwater rep here. What is the background for this in general?
Well, so in the way I recall it, and Fred, you can correct me if I got something wrong here, but the discussion was around that we would go over all the criteria, well, not the criteria, but basically go through and check all the guidelines, and then set conditions for any application. And then the language would be, should the SPGA grant approval to this application, these are the conditions that we recommend to apply, upon that being approved. That's how I recall that meeting being concluded, but I think the memo looks a little bit different that came out.
Okay, so I'm gonna put, do you want me to pull up the memo here? Does someone have the memo? I was just trying to look for it. So this is something that's in draft status, and we're just providing feedback that we think the language needs to just be adjusted in a different way that doesn't create a liability. Is that?
Well, I think so we were supposed to meet last week or the week before, I don't remember. And we were to review this, and then the meeting was canceled last minute. And I just thought that would give us, maybe it's a good idea for the planning board to have an opportunity to review it and provide input for the next time groundwater gets back together.
All right, I'm on mute. Fred, from your perspective, what the purpose of this memo revision is to make it clearer, or what is the purpose of the memo here?
The chair of the groundwater committee asked for some clarification. He's made it quite clear to each of the applicants in the last 3 or 4 months that the groundwater committee is just that, advisory, and that they don't vote to approve or disapprove a project. They vote to recommend approval to the SPGA, who has the ultimate decision. And I think it's a bit overkill, but I'm trying to accommodate what the chair would like and make sure that the wording that goes forward to the SPGA, whether it's the planning board or the zoning board of appeals, is clear that what Jason had asked for was exactly what Amy had stated that Sherburne uses is, should the SPGA decide to grant the application, whether it's a special permit or variance, these following comments are recommended as conditions in order to make sure that it meets the bylaw.
Okay.
This is always what it was intended to be. As the person who wrote the letters for the last 20+ years, it was never my intention to send a letter to the SPGA telling them that the board had voted to approve. And
Yeah.
if that was relayed by an applicant, it was clearly a mistake on their part. It was never the intention of the committee or myself.
Okay, so it sounds like just this memo was worded in a different way that was intended, because Amy, it sounds like your concern is that it's going down the criteria and it's implying a vote on the criteria, which shouldn't be taken. What Fred said is really what it should contain. Should the SPGA approve it, here are the conditions we recommend. It's as simple as that versus, is that correct?
Yeah,
Right.
what the draft was that I sent to the committee was what I had talked to them about at their previous meeting, whenever we did meet the last, which it has been a couple of months, was that these are the conditions that the groundwater committee would recommend, the comments that they would recommend as conditions, so that the project does meet the following criteria, and it comes right out of the bylaw. It's just a standard statement that says you can grant it because by implementing these as conditions, they would meet this portion of the bylaw X, Y, and Z. Those items, those 3 items that are in there. That's all. Just kind of setting the table.
I think by saying it would meet X, Y, and Z would take out where the special permit granting authority would actually have the right to ask questions too. Like, say the applicant now comes in front of us and we have questions for him, or we don't think, like, this X, Y, and Z doesn't talk about the snow removal, which could affect the groundwater, and it doesn't talk about certain aspects for reasons that, you know, we could approve or deny. I don't know if we should have the X, Y, Z in there, because then the applicant says, well, the groundwater committees are the experts and they say it meets X, Y, Z. So why are you asking us a question? You know?
Well, I'd be very surprised if this SPGA couldn't ask any questions of the applicant, regardless of what the topic was. The applicant's there to answer questions, no matter who asked them. I think the proposal of the draft was just to kind of make sure that we're saying what we intend to say, is that if you implement these conditions as these comments as conditions, then the groundwater committee feels as though it meets the bylaw. If the SPGA doesn't feel it meets the bylaw, that's certainly their discretion at any time.
Okay, so it sounds like the intent is actually in a good place, but what's happening in actual use of this is that it's being, there are unintended consequences happening here by, I think wording wise, we have to really think about how it's ultimately being used in the end. It's yielding liability to the board for maybe listing it the way that it's here may bring liability, in that it looks like the groundwater committee is approving it, even though everybody's saying here in this meeting and every other meeting they're not. But in black and white, this is the piece of paper that gets filed, right? So it's hard to put the context around the black and white piece of paper. I guess that's what the struggle is. That's what's happening in practice. So I think Bob, did you have something?
Just thinking bigger picture, the design review committee, if I remember right, does take a vote on, the design parameters of the building. You're going to carry this exercise over to what the design review committee does?
Yes. Because a long time ago, I looked up their old decisions too, and they never had memos that said the design review committee votes to approve the site plan. They used to say the design review committee met with the applicant on date X, Y, and Z. They didn't say we vote to approve, because in the end, it's really where people in the community elect the special permit granting authorities. And that's why we're the special permit granting authority. And we have advisory committees that do advisory, have an advisory purview. Even like, Michelle would say, we could say we want crushed stone and you might want mulch. But if the design review votes a certain way and it goes into litigation or something, the applicant can say, well, the design review, they're the experts and they voted this way. Like, it just makes a legal liability to have the advisory committee voting on the same thing the special permit granting authorities voting on. Like,
Well, I think you have to concentrate on the word advisory committee, okay? Advisory, in my opinion, and just food for thought, is an advisory committee, once they vote, they're not granting a special permit. They're voting to send it up to the SPGA. And the SPGA has at all times the ability to either accept in whole, refuse in whole, or accept in part.
Then
Okay,
maybe-
ultimately, it's your decision to take these advisories and either throw them out or use them. The
Right.
advisory committee has no legal standing in a courtroom with an appeal.
but that's why I think it could be worded, should the SBGA grant the special permit, then we would recommend these conditions. You know, it's more of a recommendation than a vote. I mean,
Yeah.
the advisory committee can say, all right, in our opinion, it's met all what we want to do to forward it to the next board. Like, it could be a check sheet. But I think the way that the memo's worded right now with the 3 criteria, those 3 criteria are written in our bylaw on page 764, that the criteria that the SPGA is supposed to be voting on, not the advisory committees. Or else our bylaw would say, if the advisory committee finds it meets the X, Y, and Z, then, you know, it doesn't say that.
I know it seems like, it doesn't seem like splitting hairs, so I don't mean to say that, but I know it seems like we keep saying it's advisory. It is advisory. We all understand it's advisory. What's happening is that when all of these meetings are parsed out and we just have that piece of paper, it's being used in a way that nobody intended. So how do we avoid that from happening as the end result? It is the only thing that I think is something that we're trying to be mindful of. Not that we're trying to say, oh, you can only advise us, or you can, we're the ones that get to vote. It's none of that. It's more about what this paper, taken out of everybody's understanding of it when it's in black and white, what happens, and the consequences that are coming as a result of that are true and happening. So what can we do to not let that be the case any longer?
I mean, I
guess-
think
I
part
guess-
of it is that we're getting caught between what it means when the advisory committee accepts the application and votes to move it to the next planning stage, the planning board stage, and it's being used as an approval, in more, I would say, legal, instances. And it becomes hard to differentiate what they're actually approving. Are they approving the permit, or are they approving to move it? And I think that's where the wording gets confusing.
Fred, you had something too there?
Sorry, Fred.
That's okay. I do. The committee is not approving anything. The committee has never been approving anything. I think that the draft that you're talking about, the committee hasn't even met and discussed it yet. It just went out as an attachment, as preparation for their meeting. They haven't even talked about it. I think the best thing is for them to decide how they want the letter to go. I'm certainly going to be there, and as will Anthony, and can relay the planning board's concerns about how the letter is worded, and let's see what they have to say about it. They haven't even talked about it yet. Again, they're not approving anything. They've never intended to approve anything, nor have I ever intended that the letter indicate that they've been intending to approve anything. They are advisory. They're very clear about that every time they meet. So I think we're getting a little worked up more than maybe needs to be done. So
Okay.
I'd like to see them talk about it and then decide how they want the letter to go. And then the planning board, whether it's the planning board or the ZBA, can do with it as they wish, as they always have.
Okay, so Anthony, are you able to bring that feedback, or do you have your own comments or thoughts on that? Is there any clarification, or do you not agree with that? Do you?
No, I think we've all kind of discussed what the direction that we would like to see from the planning board's perspective. And I think I have that.
Okay. All right,
Yeah,
great.
either that or we could write a memo, or you can just bring it forward. I don't know if it matters.
Do you want to bring it? You're comfortable just bringing it back?
Sure.
Okay. Millie, did you have something? I just caught out of the corner of my eye. Was that a hand raise? No? Okay.
Nope.
All right, great. Why don't we quickly approve? We have 2 sets of minutes here in these last few minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look at the October, I think it was 5th minutes?
I
Yep.
did.
Okay, are there any amendments to the minutes?
I didn't have any.
Nor did I.
Okay,
Nope,
Is
they look
there-
good.
great. I didn't have any edits either. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as submitted for October 5th?
So moved.
Second,
Second,
all in favor, Amy,
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Millie?
aye.
And carries an aye. Minutes from the 19th. Did anybody have any amendments to the minutes on the October 19th?
I mean,
I had a quick one.
Sure.
Page 2 at the very top, I just wanted to add a sentence. Ashley was talking about the trail, the multi-use trail. And we went around and talked about what we thought about it. And the very top, it had Michelle's statement. But before Michelle, I just made a statement where I said Ms. Paretsky thought it was a great project and one that the residents would support. I just wanted my statement there. And I can either forward that to you, Fred, or to Melanie, or if she's watching, just one sentence, if people agree.
Okay, will you repeat that sentence?
It was for me. So the first line on the second page,
Mhm.
I wanted to add, Ms. Paretsky thought it was a great project and one that residents would support.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so any other amendments to the minutes? Okay, is there a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Second,
Okay, all in favor, Millie,
aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Anthony? Oh, did you say aye?
I,
Yep, okay, and carries an aye. All right, that's all I have for minutes, so we're caught up there. We have a couple extra minutes here, so why don't, let's see. While we have a few minutes, I'd be willing to take some public comments within these last 5 minutes. If there's any comments on some of the bylaws that we talked about, or the presentations we heard tonight, that would be welcome. Okay, I have one hand up. Okay. Hi, Lisa, do you have a public comment?
Hi, Lisa Maselli, 13 Maple Street. Yes, I do. I mean, there are several things that were interesting in the meeting tonight. One of which was the discussion on the Ridge Road property, that the developer said there, big cleanup that had to be done, and he mentioned oil on the property. And that's kind of concerning, because if there's oil on the property, is that something the DEP should have a report on? And how vast is the oil? Is it a spill? Where is the oil? How is it going to affect a piece of land that has water on 3 sides of it? And is this something that, because of all of the talk of the condition that it's in, is that something that the building inspector should go down and look at now to ascertain really what's going on down there? Because I do know there's an empty car there, and there's several homes there. Well, not homes, little shacks. And, what is the condition of it? And two, is it not the responsibility of the owner to clean that up? And most especially if there's an oil spill.
So Fred, I guess if there's an oil spill at a property, or I don't know, Bob, maybe you know this as well, do we notify anybody, or is there an obligation to clean that up at all? Or how do we deal with that? It's so close to the water and everything else. Oh, you're up. There you go.
I am not aware of an oil spill. I believe the developer may have misspoken. I think he may have been referring to an old oil tank that may have been left over from one of the cottage type units that were there. There's a lot of debris. I think he was, in previous discussions with the developer, he said there was a lot of waste that needed to be cleaned up there. Building materials, dilapidated buildings, junk cars, lots of miscellaneous junk strewn about, some abandoned hand-dug wells. There's some holes out there. It's not an easy place or even a safe place to be walking around. I don't recall anybody indicating there was an oil spill. If there was an oil spill, DEP would have been notified. There would be a report on it. The fire department would be involved, and Bob can elaborate a little bit more if he has any information, but I don't, and I will check tomorrow to see if he was referring to an oil spill or perhaps just an abandoned oil tank.
Okay, that'd be great. And then if there is a property, if this, that has abandoned cars or anything else, is it the owner's responsibility to clean that up? Or it seems like it's on the developer right now to clean it up? Oh, yeah, Bob.
It could run either way. Right now, obviously if there's a car out there and there is one, it's the owner's responsibility to clean it up. There is I've got nothing in my wheelhouse where somebody can come in and buy the lot and then assume responsibility for the cleanup.
Right.
That would be perfectly fine. To my knowledge, nobody has reported any kind of a spill to me of any kind. I don't know about it. If it was reported to me, I would probably call the fire department, the health department, and the DEP. But I have not been notified of any of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Lisa. We do have a hard stop at 8 o'clock. So thank you for your questions there, and hopefully that answered that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye. Okay, it's 8 o'clock and we are going into executive session. So I'm going to ask for a motion to go into executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subsection 3, litigation regarding pending land use litigation, the Gutierrez Company versus Northborough Planning Board, Land Court Case Number 21, MISC 000046, the Gutierrez Company versus Northborough Planning Board, Land Court Case Number 21, MISC 000380, Isomedics Operations, Inc., doing business as Steris AST versus Northborough Planning Board, Land Court Case Number 21, MISC 000436, and Abu Construction, Inc., and KA Realty, Inc. versus the Town of Northborough Planning Board, Worcester Superior Court, Civil Action Number 1985 CV 00178. Due to the chair's determination that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the planning board and or the town. Is
So
there
moved.
a second? Amy, you're on mute.
Second.
Second. Okay, all in favor? Millie,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
And carries an aye. We're going to move into executive session. I'm going to call for adjournment of the planning board meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Make
moved.
a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, Millie,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
and carries an aye. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
I'll see